Congressman Adam Schiff of California is with me. Thank you for being here, sir. A number of things I want to get to, including Iran and Guantanamo Bay, but first with immigration. Two high-profile cases in your state. In one, an illegal immigrant killing a woman in San Francisco just a few weeks ago after he had already been deported several times. In another, more recent case, an illegal immigrant sexually assaulting a 14-year-old again after he was in custody, then released, but never deported. What needs to change so that things like this don't keep happening?
Poppy, it's a good question, and I think these two cases illustrate that a simple solution is really not in the cards. In the one case involving the sexual assault, this was somebody that was granted bail, and I think probably the predominant issue there is, should he have been granted bail at all? Should the bail have been much higher? That's a very different question than that involved in the second case where you had somebody who was repeatedly deported, who was sent to San Francisco after serving one sentence to be charged with another crime, ultimately not charged with that old drug case. And there are a lot of questions there about why he was even sent to San Francisco as opposed to being deported. So two very different issues. I think they do call up the fact that because there are such different circumstances and part of a larger immigration debate, we really need a very comprehensive solution to this problem. Part of it deals with the criminal justice system. Part of it deals with the immigration system. But I think we ought to resist simplified calls like that you hear from some of the presidential candidates that aren't going to solve the problem.
I mean, they're resonating. Donald Trump was asked by Jake Tapper this morning, about the 11 million plus illegal immigrants in this country now. What do you do with them, even if you stop more from coming in? And he said, look, it's hard, and he didn't have a solution to that now. He said you've got to stop them from coming in. But those words that he's using are resonating with voters, as seen in the polls.
Well, they do resonate with a small group. Now, it's a sizable group in a divided Republican presidential primary. But yes, that vein has always been out there. He's tapping into that vein. I don't think it's reflective of a majority of Americans who want a comprehensive solution to immigration. And I do think even Donald Trump understands that the millions of people that are here illegally are not going to be deported. It's simply not practical, feasible, or even desirable. So we have to find a pathway to citizenship that requires them to learn English, to pay back taxes, to abide by all of our laws. I think we all understand that's where we're headed. But unfortunately, we've had a Senate bill that passed with strong bipartisan support languish now for a couple of years. And until the Speaker decides he's willing to take on the Tea Party part of his own caucus, that issue is going to continue to languish.
I want to talk to you about Guantanamo Bay. It's something you and I have talked a lot about, but this sort of got lost in all the other headlines this week. But the fact that two former detainees of Guantanamo Bay late this week arrested by Belgian police in a counterterrorism operation targeting a recruiting network for al-Qaeda in Syria. These were two that were being monitored by Belgian officials, sort of the rules that were set up when they were released. What's your take on this? How concerned are you about that?
Well, I'm always concerned about what happens with the detainees and former detainees because a certain percentage of them do return to the fight. At the same time, keeping Guantanamo open has served as a magnet for recruiting new jihadis, and it's been a real black eye for the United States. I think the president is ultimately right about this. We need to shut this down. I think Senator McCain is right about this. We need to shut it down. We need to figure out an orderly way to do that. And for the first time, I have some optimism because you have Senator McCain really stepping forward and expressing a willingness to work with the administration putting forward a plan it should release within, I hope, the next few days, outlining a way that we can close this in a safe and responsible way. But yes, I'm always concerned with what happens with these former detainees.
I want to talk about Iran. Earlier this week with my colleague Wolf Blitzer here on CNN, you talked about the Iran deal, and you did note that it will mean an improvement in Iran's economy, more money for Iran that could give a lot of strength to terror groups like Hezbollah. Let's roll that.
Absolutely. They'll have greater resources. Now, it may not be in excess of $100 billion. The real number may be closer to $56 billion when you consider funds that are already obligated. But nonetheless, a big infusion of money. Certainly some of that they're going to have to plow into their economy. That's what Rouhani's been making the case for in Iran. But Iran has proved very cost-effective in their support of Hezbollah. They've been able to stretch a few dollars a long way. Now they'll have a lot more dollars.
How concerned are you about the fact that some of this resulting deal, if it makes it through Congress, is going to be more funds for Iran to potentially support Hezbollah?
Well, I'm very concerned about it. I mean, there are two things about the agreement that I think are worth a lot of thought and do, frankly, raise troubling questions. One is the length of the agreement. I would like to have seen this agreement go on far longer. The other is what Iran is going to do with all these resources. At the same time, Poppy, the most difficult question of all cuts the other direction, and that is, what's the alternative to this deal? And I've yet to hear a very good answer to that question. So while there are problems raised, we're going to have to find, if this agreement goes through, a way to contain and confront Iran through its of Hezbollah and Hamas, through whatever greater resources it has to plow in to supporting the regime of Bashar al-Assad or the Houthi rebels. So those are going to be real problems to be confronted if this goes through. But, you know, one point I would emphasize, and that is, with or without this agreement, this is something we need to do, and I think we need to work more closely with Israel, with our Gulf allies, to make sure that our partners in the region are spending their defense dollars in the most cost-effective way. Because remember, the Saudis and the other Gulf nations, they're spending 8 to 10 times what Iran does on defense. But Iran is nonetheless using it in, I think, a far more cost-effective way to make trouble in the region, to support terror in the region. And we need to make sure those greater resources are more effectively used to contain and confront Iran.
We'll be watching Congress, your fellow congressmen and women, in the middle of this 60-day review period for the Iran deal. Kerry making his case on the Hill this week. We'll be watching. Congressman Adam Schiff, thank you.
Thanks, Bob.